Hi, I'm Chris. I'd like to thank you for clicking on this video, and I hope that you can stick through the whole video. I'm not scripting or editing any of these things, and I'm imagining this is going to be a long one because it deals with labels, both the labels that we put on ourselves and the labels that society puts on us. And it's really been a passion of mine right from kind of day one. I'm currently in Ecuador, and I came here to go on a relocation retreat. And I met a beautiful lady who is 83 years old. I believe she was 83. I've always had challenges with numbers, and ironically, I just found out 2 days ago that there's a condition called dyscalculia, which is a condition that's similar to dyslexia, but only with numbers, which is kind of funny too, because as I've talked to different people about my issues with numbers, I've always kind of explained it that it felt like I was dyslexic with numbers. Anyway, it's beyond the point. So back to this lovely lady that I met. She embodied, from talking with her life story, the idea of not ever allowing labels to define her. She was 83, like I said, I believe. And she was here all by herself. All of her friends and family were like, "What are you doing? You're by yourself and at your age, and you're just going to go off and check out about living somewhere else." And she was, from the stories she told me a little bit about her life, she's always just been one of those people who didn't let anybody ever label her, and is such an inspiration for all of us, that even at her age right now, she just wants to do what she wants to do. Really interesting thing she did is she asked me a question. She asked me what my earliest memory was, and what came to mind, my earliest memory, also had to do with labels. And it goes back to when I was in kindergarten. And the teacher asked all of us in the class to draw a picture of our favorite thing. And so kids did a whole bunch of different things. But what I did is I drew a picture of me, just me, no clothes. There was no genitals or anything. It was just me by myself, just standing there. And then what she did is she started laughing and criticizing and saying, "Well, you can't do that." And I got so angry. I Even at that age, I could see, like, what are you thinking? Like, that's probably the best answer anybody could ever give about what, if you ask the child, what's your favorite thing? Of course, you could put your G.I. Joe or your doll or whatever the thing is, but I think that's a perfect answer. And so I ran out of the class and hid under these stairs, and I wouldn't come out. They wanted to get me out. And so I didn't come out until my mom came to get me. And then she came and found me and said, "What's the problem?" And I told her what had happened. And she said, "Well, they're just stupid. So come on, let's just go home." And so right from that day, I realized that labels just were a horrible thing. And that's kind of led to a lot of points in my life. I've ended up gravitating to these places that I was helping people get rid of those labels. One of the first times that I really started helping people with these labels, I was in swim team and I was young, and the manager of the pool came up to me, and even though I was legally not allowed to teach swimming lessons, she asked if I would volunteer to help the teachers teach, because there's a whole bunch of little haywire kids and kids that couldn't be taught, and she was wanting me to come and help with those kids so the teacher could teach the other kids. And I thought it was a great deal because I got the pool for free. So I started doing it, and I kind of fell right into it because those little haywire kids were me when I was younger. And so it turned out I just loved trying to find creative ways to get people past their stumbling blocks. And then what ended up happening is, instead of just having that one kid from the one class, the other teachers would end up passing the kid that they had a problem off to me. And I was no longer just with the teacher, I was then just kind of on my own teaching. And what they did is they ended up, all the teachers kept giving me kids to teach that were having a hard time. So I ended up having a whole class teaching these kids, a whole group of kids that were the ones that you weren't supposed to be able to, that were labeled that they weren't be able to be taught. And I loved it. I found it a challenge, and I loved it. It was just a great thing to do. There's another time too, growing up. This was when I was young, and there was a older fella who society had labeled as disabled. Now, the term I'd rather use is challenge, and his name was Wayne, and I like the term challenge. I worked in the field for a long time, and they kept changing, trying politically correct to come and to have all these different politically correct terms. And I think challenged is a great thing because it's really empowering. What it is it's saying that I'm challenged with these different things, but it doesn't define me. And it's more about rising to that challenge. And so this, my friend Wayne, who was an adult at the time, he was challenged both developmentally and socially. And so it took a long time for him to even come out of the house. And Wayne and I used to play all the time together, and people would drive down the road and I could see them looking at us and having judgments. And as far as I was concerned, it was just Wayne. Wayne was a great friend. We'd play all the time together, and I just saw Wayne as a guy who had some quirks. And one of the quirks that Wayne had, he always loved dressing in the same outfit. He'd always have these button-up shirts that would have the short sleeves and slacks, and he was very particular about always wanting to be clean. He had to, even though we were sitting down playing with the Tonka trucks, he was always wanting to stay clean all the time. That was just a quirk of him. So one day we were playing, and I was bouncing a ball, and the ball went over this little edge. We had two roads that were separated, and one road was a little bit lower than the other, and there's this huge rock that was in between. And I go running for the ball, and went flying over the thing, landed on my head, knocked myself out. And in that moment, even though Wayne had such an issue with being clean all the time, without a thought, he scooped me up, grabbed me. He was covered in blood, and he went running up to my house, to my parents, to show them that I was knocked out and I had blood all over him. And that's just a perfect example right there of those times when people define them. And he was even defining himself in that moment, because he would never want to be dirty. But in that moment, the caring that he had for me overrode everything. And it's really about that these labels that we put on ourselves and others put us in a box and define us. And it's really hard. Once you're in that box, the box is either the society putting on us or that we put on ourselves, then you can't get out of that box. Now you've defined what's possible and what's not possible. And it's only harmful. It's like having a backyard that has all fenced in, and it's you never know what's outside the fence. But what I'm encouraging everybody to do is put a gate in that fence so that you can go out. You don't have to go out, but if the gate's there, you can go out. And it's amazing things that you'll find outside that gate. Another story that I'd like to share was when I was a teacher's assistant. So the way that it worked when you're a teacher's assistant, the school board would give you an assignment to go to a classroom, and I'd be designated to be with one child who's having some difficulties. And I kind of never operated that way. I would work with that one child, but I would kind of bounce around to whoever needed help, because I did both for two things. Other people needed help, not just the one who was designated. And also that I didn't want the stigmatism of the one child who had some challenges with whatever it was that they had be kind of like singled out as there was something wrong with them. So that was just always the way that I operated. And it was really interesting, this class that I was in, it was split between the morning time was one teacher and the afternoon was a different teacher. And what it really demonstrated, there's that same classroom with the same kids were completely different based upon that teacher who was there. The first teacher was this man who was so difficult. He was one of those people who just has his tenure and was just kind of going through the motions. And then the other teacher in the afternoon, this lady, she was just fun and engaging. And what ended up happening is that morning time, the kids would just be crazy. They'd be screaming and all over the place, and he'd lose it and be screaming at him at the top of his lungs. All the other teachers would know about it and they'd hear it, and it was just chaos. And then you had the other person who had just made the classroom perfect. All the kids were quiet, they loved learning, and everything was great. And so what ended up happening is there's lunchtime, and I hadn't brought a lunch, and so I thought, oh, I'll just go out during recess and participate in watching the kids with the other teacher who was assigned to be on lunch duty. And so during the whole time when I was out there, because of my teaching and my lifeguarding, I really got good at pointing or being observant of things. With lifeguarding, I never wanted to have to rescue anybody, so the best way to avoid that was to be really observant and stop the problem before it was a problem. And so what happened is I was scanning around, watching all the kids play and everything, and then I noticed that there's this group of girls. There's about 4 of them, and they were all standing in a group together. And then I noticed this other little girl just a little bit away from them, and she was looking really, really sad. And so I kind of walked a little bit closer, not so close that the kids could hear or see, but think that I could hear them. But what I ended up seeing is that these girls were all ganging up on her, and quietly under their breath, they're once again putting labels on her and saying, oh my God, look at her. What a loser. Look at what she's wearing. She's such a loser. Nobody wants to hang out with her. And they kept saying all these horrible, horrible, horrible things. And so instead of, like most teachers or supervisors, teachers, what they would have done is they would have gone there and confronted them and made this situation where they both have to be talking it out and make a big, huge production about it. And I didn't do that. What I did is I slowly started walking up to the words and got in between the group of girls and the little girl. And I ended up kind of corralling them away by moving towards them, and they ended up moving off. And then that little girl, that gave her time to get away, because what was happening is she would try to move away from them, and they would just follow her and continue to pick on her and say these horrible things. And so what happened is I corralled them off to the side, and I spoke to all of them, and I said, girls, I heard what you were saying to her. And I said, those are horrible, horrible things that you were saying. And I said, what I'd like you to do is imagine if you were her, and that you were, all those words were said to you, because she's no different than you are. But you've all decided that you're going to gang up on her. And I said, so just think about that. That could be you. And how would you feel? And so I left it at that. That was the end of it. For the rest of the lunch hour, they didn't bother her. And I purposely left myself away from them and went around, but I was keeping an eye on them to see if they went back, and they didn't go back. Now, after lunch, we had gym. And so all the class, this is with that first teacher. It was a gym class time. And so all the class got together, went running into the gym, and immediately that little girl just walked and sat right down on the bench when all the other kids were in the gym. And I asked the teacher, I said, "Oh, is there a problem? Is she injured?" And then he said, "Oh no, she never wants to participate." And that was it. Once again, another one of these labels. And so I went and sat down with her, and I started talking to her, and I said, "So what's the problem? Why aren't you participating?" And she said, "Oh, I can't do it. I won't be good at it." What we were doing is they were playing kickball, kind of like baseball, but when you kick the ball, you have bases. And so I said, "Well, how do you know you're not good at it?" And she goes, "Well, I just don't want people to make fun of me and laugh, and I don't know how to play it, so I'm not going to be good." And so I said, "Okay, well, you know what? How about if I can show you, and I can give you some tips. I can go right beside you, and I can tell you when to kick the ball and everything, and we'll just try it." I said, "There's no harm in trying it." And she said, "Well, I'm not sure about it." And I said, "Okay, well, you just sit here and think about it, and if you want to, I'll go up with you and I'll help you, and I'm sure it won't be a problem. I'm sure you'll do a great job." So then what I did is all the teams were divided up, and they started kicking the ball and playing their games. And all the people on the bench were just quietly sitting there when their teammate kicked the ball, and they weren't doing anything. So what I thought was, I said, I went up to all the kids sitting on the bench, and I said, "Oh, I thought you guys were a team, and you're not cheering for your teammates? Like, come on, do you guys want to win or not want to win?" And so then what I got them to do, and then they started getting all pumped up. And so every time people got up to kick the ball, I got them screaming and cheering. And so they started getting into it, and they were, yay, rooting and rooting and rooting. And so what happened is this little girl, she saw that everybody was kind of enthusiastic. And so then I went back to her and I said, "Hey, how about now? Do you want to try doing it?" And so she gathered up her courage, and she said, "Yeah, I'll try it." And so the whole beauty of this is by this time everybody was already in the flow of cheering for everybody who was on the team. So even though everybody else had always seen her as that quiet girl, the ostracized, strange girl, whatever labels that they're throwing on her, at that moment they didn't. She was just part of the team. So she got up there, I went beside her, and I just sat there. I said, "You can do this. When the ball comes to you, just kick it as hard as you can." And it was amazing. She kicked the ball. Everybody cheered for her. She ran around the bases. She got a full home run, and everybody was cheering. And when she came back, everybody was high-fiving. And it was just great. And so it's just one of those things that shows, that I'd like to demonstrate to everybody, that the difference that one person can make, and just changing those labels, and all of a sudden it was all gone. And for the rest of the class, and I don't know how the things went after, I was only there for the one day, but for the rest of the day, she was no longer that ostracized kid who was picked on. And so it's just evidence that both people, society, and ourselves, by putting ourselves in those boxes, we're really cheating ourselves from a lot of amazing things. I don't know if I mentioned before, but I've been going through a whole bunch of legal issues that's been super stressful since 2018. And through that whole time, I've been trying to find ways to cope and deal with the stress of everything, and try to kind of find purpose and meaning in all of the issues that were going through it. And it was super stressful. And one of the ways that I was trying to do it is, I ended up, when I try to solve problems, what I do is I like to kind of look back at like a third person perspective and try to break everything down to its simplest components. And so because I was in this whole crazy situation, I kind of was trying to figure out what kind of patterns and what things had I done in my life. Is there things that I had done that had led to this kind of situation? And I ended up stumbling upon, trying to deal with this, I ended up stumbling upon this really, I think, great exercise that would serve a lot of people well in finding out what their passion is, and to break the labels that they've defined for themselves on who they are and what they are. And what it is that I did is I looked at my life, like I said, almost like another person viewing my life, and just looking at all the steps that had happened. So not the little nuances of stuff, not like I did this because of that, just looking back at it with no judgment or anything. And what I'd ask you all to do is to do this same kind of exercise. And so what you'll end up finding if you do this and you pull back and you just look at a series of things, like well, in my situation, what it was is I right early on, in my early 20s, I decided to buy a condo, and everybody else was saying, you can't buy a condo, you're too young, you don't know anything. So instead of thinking all that nuance, I just thought of these series of things like, oh, you bought a condo, then you decided to move from there, you went to this, move back home, and all these different series of things. And so what you'll end up finding out if you pull back and just look at it, your life is a whole bunch of series of events that you've done. You'll end up finding out that there's all of these really empowering things. There's a lot of baggage that we'll be carrying around with ourselves, that you'll realize that by the actions, if you just review your life, you'll see that, really see yourself clearly. Because what we end up doing is we have these little scripts about ourselves and what we do and what we're doing and why we're doing them and everything like that. But when you pull yourself back and just look at it as a series of events, you'll end up realizing that there's all these things that you've done that are really unique and empowering and not normal as they are to other people. And what you'll find is a lot of these things that that you do, the things that you do, we discount the things that come easy to us, which are actually superpowers. There's a whole bunch of things that when you do this review of your life, you'll find out that you're the person who doesn't let things stop them, that the jobs that you've jumped to from job to job or event to event, all these different things, it's really empowering. You'll get to see yourself in a whole new light, and you'll see these different skills and things that to you are nothing. Just like I said before, because they come so easy to us, we don't put any weight or any value to them. And that's the real thing to be looking for. Those things that we think are nothing are superpowers to other people, and we discount that. And so I think like for instance, you could be right now in a job and you've defined yourself and labeled yourself as, I'm an accountant, and that's what I do. I've spent all my time, all my education, everything. This is what I'm doing. That's just what I am. And what I'd like you to challenge you to do is to do this little life review. And what you'll find out is all of these things that come super easy to you, that might be your thing. Because what else would you rather do? If you could find something in your life that is fulfilling and easy and can make you money, that's the greatest thing in the world. And I can't impress upon you enough to review and look at those things. There's so many things that that you just think are nothing. For instance, I've renovated houses and had rental properties and have learned how to fix and do everything. And so for me, all of those things, because I know how to do them, they're no big deal. And one day we're at a potluck dinner at some friend's house, and so I went into the bathroom to have a leak, and I noticed their toilet was running. So while I was having a pee, I just lifted it up, fixed the toilet, put the lid back down, came back out, and then it just so happened that the wife was walking in right after me. And then she came out all excited. She goes, oh my God, that sound that the toilet is making is finally gone. And then I said, oh, I just fixed it. The toilet was just running, it was no big deal. And to her, that was a huge deal. They'd been living with this thing forever. And then for me, it was like, it was nothing. And so there's going to be a lot of things. If you look back at your life, you'll end up finding that there's all these things that come so easy to you. And once again, if these come easy to you and you enjoy it, find a way to make a living at it. Your creativity is the only thing. So if you're somebody who's just, it's really easy for you to decorate. All your friends and everything say, oh, you're so great at putting all this stuff together. I don't know how you do it. There you go. You don't have to learn it. Like one of the things that holds people back all the time is they stop themselves from doing things, and they put themselves in this little box again because they don't know how to do it. And that's the whole definition of doing something, is that you don't know how to do it. Like, you do it, then you know how to do it. So don't limit yourself and stop yourself from doing things because you don't know how to do it, because that's the whole definition. And you'll learn, and that's great. Learning is amazing. And so don't define it. Even if you've been doing stuff for a long time, if you're not happy at it, you can always change it. And what's the worst thing that can happen is you try it and you find it's hard. And you just keep doing it until you do it right. If it's something that you love and it comes easy to you, the little incidentals are just going to be things that you're going to figure out along the way. So I just really encourage you to drop the labels for yourself, drop the labels of other people. I even in that exercise, when I was looking back at my life from a distance, another thing that I realized, even though I hate labels and it's really bugged me in my life, I realized that my interactions, both with people and with my partner, I was putting labels on them with my interactions. What would happen is every time that we have these discussions with people, and then the person in front of you, say it's a scenario which leads to an argument. What ends up happening is you'll say a statement, and then what we do is we create a template of what their responses are supposed to be. Now, this is a make-believe world that we've come up with our own. We're putting them in a box of what they're supposed to be saying. And inevitably, they're not going to be saying what we thought. So then what happens is they say whatever they're going to say, and then we react and we get angry. And which is crazy, because I created the response that I was expecting from them. So instead of where I've come to the place right now, and it's a place of peace when in these interactions, this happens either if it's with a partner or if it's with anybody around. If you just realize that the person is going to be saying what they're going to be saying, and you just wait to hear what they're saying instead of reacting. And so the way that I initially got past this is I used this, one of the Stoic principles. And what it said is that anything and everything is possible. And so to get over my initial reaction, what I did is when I had interactions with people, instead of having a predefined idea of what they're going to say, I was just repeating in my head, anything is possible. Anything is possible. So when you put that in your head, whatever they say, you'll go, okay, of course, they're saying it because that's what they're saying. What I was doing before is like I said, I was putting a label on it, defining what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable, instead of just accepting that everybody's going to have their own story and their own history that leads them to say what they're saying. And then I realized how arrogant it was of me for me to be kind of making any judgment on anybody else, because the only way we could really ever make an assessment and a judgment of somebody is if we were with them through their whole life, because we're only getting a snapshot of what they're telling us right now. But the reality is they've had a whole lifetime, we've had a whole lifetime of all these events that make us act and do what we do. And I just realized how arrogant it was of me that I thought that I could be defining what they should be saying or why they were saying it. We make up these little scripts in our head thinking, oh, I figured this person out, they're saying it for this reason or that reason. It's like, no, there's no way that we could possibly know. We're not allowing people to be individuals, and if we allow people to be individuals and ourselves to be an individual, instead of trying to act a certain way because we want people to see us in a certain light, the beauty of all of us is that we're all individuals. And if you can be the most authentic self that you can with no judgment of any others and just allow everybody to be who they are and not judge them, they're just doing them because they're doing them. It has no reflection on us. The only thing that we should be responsible for is being the best version of us. That's the only thing we have control of, is how we react to situations. We can't decide what life's going to be throwing at us. The only thing that we can be control of is how we respond to those things. And in my mind, why would I choose to live in any other way than positive and kind of at peace? It doesn't make any sense for me to live in a place of anxiety and anger and frustration. And that only, like I said, stems from me trying to control somebody else's experience. The only experience I have to worry about is mine, and I want my experience to be as positive as I can. Another thing, speaking to that, as far as allowing others to be themselves, like I was saying, I've been going through a bunch of stressful situations, and one of the consequences of that is that I've had a whole bunch of stomach issues. And stomach issues, as science has found out now, our gut biome, all the bacteria that are in our body, they're basically control us. So if we're stressed, they're stressed. And then when they're stressed, we're stressed. And so I've been battling all of these stomach issues. And when you have stomach issues, the term that is often used is dysbiosis. And I looked up the root word, or the meaning of dysbiosis. And I wrote it down here, and I wanted to quote it properly because I found that it was quite something. The fact that bacteria are us and control us, so they're basically people. The bacteria are people. And so I looked up the word dysbiosis, and it comes from two different words. The first word is dys, and dys is defined as bad or difficult. And then biosis. And biosis is way of living or life. And so putting them together, it translates to bad living or life in distress. And what I was feeling is that right now in our times that are going on, the world seems to be in dysbiosis, where it's a life in distress and bad living. And a lot of that is back to these labels. Everybody's wanting to be labeled, and once we label these people, be it you're a right winger or you're a left winger or whatever it is, as soon as we define those things, then they can never be anything other than that. They're not people. And just like the gut, there's trillions of these bacteria, and if there's dysbiosis. The problem is that there's an imbalance in the bacteria. So what's happening in our society and in the stomach is you get this imbalance where all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of bad bacteria, and the good bacteria are still there, but they're not doing well. And the way to have a good, healthy human is to have a bacteria that's working together. And a bacteria that works together isn't bacteria that's worrying about what the other bacteria is doing. There's not that all when you have a nice happy stomach, each bacteria is not looking on going, hey, what are you doing over there? What are you doing over there? They're just doing them. And when all the bacteria is doing their thing, you end up having a happy life. And I really think that that's kind of the place that we're at right now, is that the world is kind of in dysbiosis. And I think the way that we can all help in changing that is by being our own little happy bacteria and just worrying about us and doing the best that we can so that we can do the best job for ourselves. So don't worry about what the bad bacteria is doing or the good bacteria, or however you want to define them. Be the best bacteria you can for yourself. Worry about yourself, be the best you, and that will spread. As soon as you start flourishing, the bacteria right beside you starts flourishing. That's kind of how probiotics work. Probiotics, even though they're not necessarily staying in our stomach, what they do is they transit through our stomach. And what happens is you start seeing a whole bunch of the good bacteria that's in there that's not doing very well because the bad bacteria is there. All of a sudden, when you see some good stuff happening, they see some nice probiotics going through the system, the lagging, suffering good bacteria start realizing, hey, things can be better. And so they end up getting healthier. And I think life is like that for us humans, that if you just worry about yourself and you start being the best you can be, that's going to reflect on others. And that's how we end up making changes, is by worrying about ourselves, living our best life, and that will spread through and we'll all be happy. I hope that this video, that you stuck with me and that you got something out of it. And I hope that you live your happy, best life that you can. And don't allow yourself to be labeled. Don't label others, and live your best life. Thank you, and hope you have a happy day. Bye-bye.